Order, order. Welcome to the Public Accounts Committee on Thursday the 12th of February 2026. Today's session is in two parts. The first panel is with the witnesses from the National Audit Office to discuss with them their estimates for 26/7. The second panel with witnesses from Capita for a follow-up session to our inquiry on the administration of the Civil Service Pension Scheme. Therefore, the first order of business for today is to consider the NAO's main estimate, which sets out its budget's plan for the next financial year 26/7. We'll be looking to scrutinise the NAO's drivers of spending, including its staff numbers, pay awards, additional audit responsibility, and contracted out audits and property matters. We'll also be looking at productivity, efficiency, resilience of the NAO, its capital spending, as well as changes to its value for money programme. So, of course, our three witnesses are very well known to us today, but CNAG, would you just for the record like to introduce yourself and your fellow directors likewise, please?
Good morning. I'm Gareth Davies. I'm Comptroller and Auditor General.
Thank you. Max.
Max Che. I'm the Executive Director with the responsibility for value for money work.
Well, very welcome. And Rebecca.
Rebecca Sheeran. I'm Chief Operating Officer at the National Audit Office.
Very good morning to you all, and thank you all very much for coming. So, I think we're starting with Clive, please.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the NAO, we're looking at your requests for funding, and it seems you're asking for a real terms decrease, Comptroller. When we have audits from you about other government departments, frequently we get examples of organisations saying they can do more for less. Aren't you now putting yourself in the same position? It hasn't always gone well in government departments, has it?
No, as you say, although there are good examples as well, and hopefully we're one of those. So I'll just explain the shape of this budget for next year and why it looks as it does. Essentially, we're starting to see some of the fruits of the investment of the last few years. That's the big picture, I think, here. So as the committee knows, we've overhauled our audit software platform. We're now using entirely cloud-based modern audit software. We're using increased levels of data analytics, which is automating some previously manual bits of the audit process. And that's the start of what it will be a significant change process over the next few years. So it's starting to become possible to do our audits more efficiently whilst maintaining the much improved quality standards we've seen over the last few years. So that's point one, I think. Point two, we've been working on productivity in the NAO much more than just on technology. So we've got a people strategy that has us better managing our people. That has very practical implications, including a reduction in sickness absence, which is reflected in these projections for next year as well. And then finally, we're sweating our assets in the way that we recommend the rest of the public sector does. So we are efficiently now occupying the right amount of space in our building, and we're letting out the surplus that's been made available through that process, and we expect to be pretty much fully let for the coming financial year. So that's increased our income against the given level of expenditure. So those things together mean that we're able to confidently predict cashable savings for next year and therefore a more efficient overall picture.
Right, I think it's always good to get on the record precisely what has been promised. So when we come and look at performance in future years about the promises now, you're going to be an exemplar, are you, for government departments about how to do things?
That's what we're aiming to be, and given who we are, it's really important that we do that. And you'll have seen a table in our estimate document that sets out our cashable efficiency savings over the next 3 years. We've only included the ones in there where we're either already contracting for them or we have an incredibly robust plan for delivering them. There's no speculative balancing figures in there. It's everything we know we can deliver. So what we're going to actually try and do is overachieve against that, but we're only promising what we're certain about.
Thank you very much, Clive. I think I'm going to come to you, Rebecca, next, please, as the COO. And this is a question all about staff and doing more for less. So of your total estimate for 109.8 million, 71.7% is total expenditure. You basically are having less staff than you had the year before. I think the estimate tells us you're going down from 1,122 to 1,115, and eventually in 28-29 to 1,098. is this level of staffing realistic to do what you have to do, bearing in mind you've got an increased volume and complexity of work?
Thank you. Yes, you're quite right. The number of staff that we're budgeting for in the year ahead is 1,122, which is an increase on the number of staff that we had last year, in order for us to both continue with that insourcing of work that has historically been contracted out, and to take on some of those new responsibilities that we know about now. But in the years that follow that, our current expectation is, as you have said, Chair, that we will gradually reduce some of our staff cost numbers. I think that is as part of that productivity and efficiency plan that the CNAG has just talked about. And as we look to take those efficiencies from the investments we've made in improving our audit methodology, our guided workflow system, and our training and our investment in our people over recent years. Of course, our estimate in future years is subject to a very thorough process that we go through every autumn, taking stock of the most recent understanding of responsibilities, the number of audits we will have to undertake, which does change over time, as you know, but also a thorough look at where we see further opportunities to increase our productivity, which we hope there will be, as the CNAG has just said. Of course, we also need to stand back through that process each year and consider the skills and the capabilities that we will need as the nature of audit changes, and make sure that we have what we need to deliver our strategy. So at the moment, we're setting out the 3-year view as we see it right now, but that is subject to that thorough assessment process each year.
So Rupert will ask you in a minute about efficiencies and the use of technology, but I want to focus my next question on staff. Now, you talk about that reduction in staff from 27, 28. I assume that that's of the more junior staff, because it's those more simpler tasks you're going to take out, the lower trained auditors or auditors in training, which gives me a worry about the future as to how you're going to, in the future, however well AI does, and Rupert will come on to that in a minute, you will still need experienced auditors to actually check that the AI is producing the right answers. What are you doing to think about that?
Absolutely. We're doing a great deal of thinking about exactly that, as I think all other organisations that are looking at the future of accountancy and the future of audit are doing. In this year's estimate, we have slightly reduced the number of trainees that we are budgeting for to 55. That's from a high point a couple of years ago, when we actually increased the number of trainees to build up our pipeline to do that insourcing of audits. We think that 55 is a good number that still sets us up to have the skills that we will need in a few years' time. We're planning for those people qualifying in 3 years or so. In terms of those efficiencies in subsequent years, whilst a lot of the more routine tasks, you're right, are the things that will be taken away potentially with increased automation, we're not necessarily assuming that future efficiencies will all come from our trainee cadre. We're very conscious that there is only so far you can go whilst making sure we are investing in that pipeline. We'll also be thinking a lot about how we skill all of our people for the future to be working differently, and that includes thinking about how we train people to really focus on those judgments and those things that only humans can do, because whilst there is great scope from automation, we are really, really conscious that audit is still a profession which is about judgment. We need to make sure people have those right skills, and that everything that is generated through AI is subject to meaningful human review and the very high quality standards that you expect from us.
So, Gareth, you're sort of cutting edge of being involved in discussions on auditing standards. The subject we've been talking about in this last set of questions, how are you benchmarking your organisation against other major auditors to make sure that you've got the right level and skills mix of staff in your organisation?
Well, I mean, there's a kind of formal answer to that, which is, as the committee knows, we are annually assessed in the same way as the big firms by the Financial Reporting Council as our regulator. So there are public reports on the quality of our work, and of course that's only possible if you've got the right people with the right skills to do it. I mean, increasingly the focus of the regulator is shifting from just looking at individual audits, which it will continue to do, but it's moving more to understanding our system of quality management as an organisation delivering audits, and that includes everything you've just been talking about. So the training programme we have for our staff, our skill mix, do we have the right mix of expertise on every audit, everything you need, in other words, to guarantee quality. And so we're using that system of quality management to make sure that we're tuned up in all of those areas, including the skill mix we need for the future. It's not just about the intake of trainees, of course, for the future. It's also how we reskill the entire workforce from us three through the rest of the organisation, because unless the senior people responsible for the audits understand how the new technology is working, they won't be able to make good judgments on audit findings either. So this is a reskilling of the entire organisation.
Thank you very much. Rupert Lowe, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, Gareth, it's unusual to find you sitting at the front table rather than to our right, assisting us ably. So, and I'd like to thank you, because the depth of information you give us all is fantastic. Yeah. When I read this report, I was prompted to ask a general question first of all, which is that we sit round this table and we hear government departments. They come here annually or whatever and sit there and go disappear for a year and come back, and we're told, and I've come onto the committee relatively recently, but I keep hearing of stories of where things haven't improved, things haven't changed, things haven't got better. So I thought to myself, when I read your proposal, your sort of outline proposal, is there a case for this committee, and with your help, to do actually less audits, but do them in greater depth, actually help this committee to focus on taxpayer waste, on departmental waste, whether it's assignment contracts, whatever it is? Is there a reason for a smaller, lighter, more aggressive National Audit Office, which actually does less audits, but does them in, basically actually goes into huge detail and then makes constructive criticisms? Because I from where I sit, I see the state is less efficient than the private sector, and yet nobody's holding it to account. So I'm asking you the question really, could we trim this budget, make it more effective by cutting down, laser focusing our attack, and if government departments aren't performing, there should be consequences, sackings, the sort of thing that happens in the private sector, accountability. Because I think it's accountability that we're not seeing from all of these state bodies that we're looking at. So I just wonder whether there isn't an argument for less but more incisive audits.
There was obviously a lot in there. If I just talk about the NAO for a second, because the accountability framework is a bit different, of course. But for the NAO, as you'll note, the bulk of our work and staffing is focused on the financial audit of government's accounts and public body accounts. So that's not something we choose a discretionary level of. We do the audits we're required to do by statute. That work has been going up in volume in the last few years, as it has in the private sector as well. As you'll know from private sector experience, the requirements on audits have significantly ratcheted up in the last few years. We've been subject to that along with everyone else. I'm very confident that we're delivering high quality audits for Parliament's assurance on the accuracy of those accounts. So there's a choice.
That I don't doubt at all.
And that's the bulk of our work. That's 2/3 of our work and our staff and our budget. So the bit that the PAC engages with more frequently is our value for money work, and that's I think that fits your bill actually of tightly specified and very carefully targeted to have maximum impact. It's about 22% of our budget and work. That hasn't increased over the last few years. We've essentially held that fairly level for the last few years because we think that gives the capacity that the committee can use to make effective scrutiny of people spending public money. But we work really hard to do exactly what you've described, which is how do we maximise the impact of this work? That's what drives us. And so we're not just kind of trotting out routine audits of it's this department's turn to have a VFM review from the NAO. We carefully look to see where are the big risks to value for money, where could we have most impact, We stay, to your point about staying on the issues to make sure there's change, we do that. And I think the combined effect of the NAO's focus and the committee's focus has achieved progress actually in some areas. And I think the relentless focus on the poorly performing major projects such as HS2, I think we have broken through there with some much better governance arrangements being implemented for big new projects like Sizewell now. They'll need to demonstrate they work in practice, of course, but those are big changes that wouldn't have happened without our work and without the committee's work. And there are other examples of that too. But I think your point about do we stand back and say, well, how do we make best use of this scarce resource? Our VFM budget is in the 20 millions. If you think about the £1 trillion of public spending every year we're scrutinising with that, it's a tiny level of effort. So where I agree with you is it's important we make sure that really delivers what it can deliver to the maximum. And I think we do get a lot of value from that. The asylum work we did before Christmas was a pretty innovative way of looking at an end-to-end system, exposing how that some of those well-known blockages, but actually lots of less well-known areas where that could be improved. And I think that has been influential within government, and it's making them look at those things a bit differently. We're going to do more of that kind of thing as well. And so, getting the committee's feedback on what the committee is finding most useful in doing its job, that's what we try and build into our programme. So that's the way we run it.
I thought you might enjoy becoming a Spartan rather than a Persian, but anyway. But being driven by outcomes, which I am, and having run private sector businesses, if the statute is loading you with too much work, then it's our job to change the statute if you think it needs to be changed. I wouldn't just accept that. I think what we need to do is deliver value for money for the taxpayer, because I just see money disappearing down the drain and then the taxpayer being asked to pay more tax.
Well, let me come back on that. We produced the report that the committee's used recently, arguing for a reduction in the reporting requirements on small public bodies, because we think they have gone too far, and we think they bog down those small teams with things that are actually getting in the way of the core business. And equivalently, that's meaning we're having to audit things that don't need auditing. Yep. So where we spot opportunities like that to streamline what's required and reduce the work for us, then we take them.
Well, I just asked the question because generally it's a generous question about your budget. Could we trim it and make it more effective? But look, I make the point. I make with regard to AI and the digital revolution, which we're all having to run hard to keep up with. I've been doing a lot of work legally recently, and my barrister tells me now, whereas he previously needed 2 junior barristers to do a lot of research work for him, he can now do it with AI. Now, AI, as you quite rightly say, Rebecca, is not perfect, but what it does is it cuts out a lot of legwork, and he can then use his knowledge to focus in on exactly what he needs to. It's the same with Adobe. You can now use Adobe to effectively cut through a document and get it to summarize a document for you in one A4 page. I'm sure everybody knows that. So things are changing which are going to make, because a lot of government hides behind what I call volume of paper. So what we've got to somehow do is slim it down, and not all of my colleagues on this committee agree, but I would personally also use the opportunity of social media to shame people who don't deliver for the taxpayer. I think people who don't deliver need to be outed. They need to be shown not to be delivering, and then they will deliver. Because people, if they can do it in a dirty little dark corner, they don't do it. Whereas if it's public, they tend to do it. So look, I think there's a lot of things for us collectively to think about, and those were questions I just wanted to ask you.
On AI, then we're very clear that the way we're doing our audits will be radically different in just 5 years' time from now, and it's already changing. And the reason you can be confident this is a real change is that our teams are telling us we see the need for a different skill mix, we see the need for, and when it's the practitioners who are telling you that, then you know this is real. So, and we're working very closely with the firms because as we're not a direct competitor of theirs, they are very good at talking to us about their own strategies for AI implementation. We'll never be the kind of absolute leading edge of that compared to those global enterprises, but we see ourselves as a fast follower. In other words, which bits of this are really delivering benefits? Let's get hold of those and implement them. And so that's our strategy for the next few years. But the other key point to make, though, is it does, as an auditor, it always takes two to tango. You do need the bodies you're auditing to have robust digital systems, good controls, high quality data, and when those conditions exist, then the audit can be ultra efficient. But if you're grappling with legacy systems, poor quality data, controls that aren't operating, you have to go back to, well, let's go and test some of this stuff and find out whether it's actually being properly accounted for.
Then, as you know, in the private sector, Gareth, Chairman, if I can just have one more, the incentive to get your company's data into an efficient format, so your auditors can audit it, saves you money. So you actually do make sure your systems work, because if not, your auditor charges you more. It's very hard to get an auditor now. So there is more. Where's the incentive on the public sector to do that?
First of all, delivering the efficiency savings they've all been required to, and of course, it won't just be helping the audit become more efficient if they've got high quality systems with good information. They'll be delivering better services at less cost to the taxpayer. So the incentive is being able to give you a better account of their performance on efficiency and delivery, and the audit is a byproduct of that.
Thank you.
Your answers, CNAG, led me to a very interesting question there. Without naming names, do you see a difference in the quality of the accounts presented to you across different government organisations? And if you do, what do you do about it? Because we never see any of that.
We see some of it. where we have big problems, we always bring those to you.
We see your qualification, we see your... But
I take your point.
High-level things.
Where does this work smoothly and efficiently, and yes, of course, there is a difference there. Partly because government doesn't have standardised systems across every department, so they are actually operating slightly different configurations, but also the level of expertise and so on varies from department to department. So we spend a lot of time working with them to agree a plan for addressing control weaknesses, which areas would really speed up the work of the auditor. The key people we engage with on that outside management are the audit committees for every department and public body. And where there's an effective audit committee, they are an extremely useful ally for us in requiring improvements in modern systems and data quality from management of the department. So we use all of those levers to help make rapid progress so that the ones who are further behind catch up with the best.
Thank you. Clive Betts, please.
I just follow one thing that was mentioned there. Can I say, first of all, I thought the asylum report was absolutely excellent. It was a new way of doing things, and I don't think it was very comfortable for some of the officials who had to come and answer questions about it. But I just wonder whether there's any more examples you may be looking at in that way to do audit in a slightly different approach. Very good.
Yeah, absolutely, we are. Of course, picking where it's going to have most impact is the trick here. So we're looking very carefully. I mean, I think there's some well-known. Big government priority areas which actually can't be dealt with by just one department. So there's a whole set of things around the criminal justice system where we know that if you don't understand the chain between people committing crimes, going into prison, coming out of prison, not having anywhere to live, not having a job, and so on, those well-known kind of chains of causality. So we think there's big scope for more systems thinking in the criminal justice system. Public health is the other big one. I mean, the committee has had lots of look at, actually, rather than just spending more and more money on treatment, how do we tackle prevention much more effectively than we do at the moment? The NHS is not geared up in that way, and so the only way of tackling that is by looking cross-system, because no one organisation holds all the answers to that. So there's just two areas where we are looking at application, but the committee will have other ideas which we'll obviously listen to carefully.
I think it would be helpful that just to know, because I think we all come across it all the time. We did it with benefits fraud, that it can also be not just DWP, it can be local government involved, it could be health, it could be education. The same with we looked at visas and illegal working. There are other different government departments don't always work together very effectively, and it might be helpful to have your eye put on those with some degree of detail. Could I just ask then about you are now taking the NAO more audits that were previously outsourced to do them in-house.
Yeah.
Is there any particular reason for that? Is the criteria you're laying down an
Absolutely,
outcome you want to see?
Well, it's straightforwardly a value for money question for us. Actually, it's part of our productivity push. We've really challenged hard on why are we outsourcing any of our work? And sometimes it's because we just don't have the volume of expertise needed on that topic area. And that remains the case for some of our more specialist audits, where we'll use a firm that has, so a good example, a banking specialist audit team from a firm is very useful when you're considering something like NSNI, and the committee's obviously recently examined that organisation. So those, but we were outsourcing more than just the ultra specialist areas. And the way the firm's prices have changed over time, our quality has improved as well in-house. So there's no quality reason for outsourcing more standard audits, and we can do them more cost effectively. So we've got this steady program. We're essentially reducing from about 20% outsourced to about 15%. So it's still a significant amount, but it's just that reduction is saving us a significant amount of money each year. And that's the main reason for the trend that you've spotted.
Why have you left some outsourced?
For the reason I said, really, it's where we need specialist expertise. Because if we've got one audit that requires specialist banking or insurance expertise, for example, that's not an efficient thing for us to gear up to do, to have the level of specialist staffing you would need for that. Having said that, we are not just challenging individual audit outsourcing, we're also challenging the amount of money we've had to be spending on external technical advice. And we've talked here at the committee before about, for example, we need actuarial advice for our pensions audits. We need chartered surveyor advice for valuation work. Now we are actively exploring whether we should hire our first actuary, because the volume of that work is so significant for us now that just handing over a large fees to very good but very expensive specialists doesn't feel like the right long-term trend for us. So we're being very careful about that, because I think there are risks around professional isolation of being the only actuary amongst hundreds of accountants. But we've looked at good models elsewhere where this has worked well, so we're pretty encouraged that that's a good step for us to take. And again, that should mean that we spend less on external advice on actuarial services. Right.
One further, could you give us a list to the committee of the audits that you do outsource?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you coming on to 8, or do you want 7, or do you want me to do it?
Sorry,
I'll do it. Yeah. Perhaps a question for you, Max. Pay. Are you the right person to talk to about pay? Or is that...
Depends on the question. Probably Rebecca and...
Maybe Rebecca again. So you arrived at a pay award of 2.5%, which is sort of generally a little lower than the rest of the civil service. How did you come to that calculation? Because there's a critical issue here. You've got to retain your skilled people, and you want to make sure they're as well remunerated as is reasonable. So how did you make that decision?
Thank you. In setting a pay award, we're of course trying to balance a number of different factors in terms of what we think is a reasonable ask for Parliament in terms of funding, but we inform and staff engagement, of course, and we inform that assessment both by benchmarking, detailed benchmarking that we do, that we commission each year, that informs where our kind of pay ranges are at relative to equivalents employers, particularly in the accountancy profession, looking at the kind of regional dimensions, both the London market and the North East market, where we are recruiting into. But we also look quite closely at our turnover rates, as well as what our historic pay awards have been. You may recall that a couple of years ago we did quite a lot of work around our overall pay and benefits package and introduced a new grade in our audit service line, which brought us more in line with how the firms are structured and created more of a structure of career progression. That has paid dividends in terms of improving our retention. Our retention has been particularly strong over the last year. We've had turnover of 7% across the whole of the NAO, but crucially in one of our really key grades where we historically see quite a lot of turnover in our newly qualified auditors and our senior auditors who lead the bulk of that financial audit work, our turnover has been at 8% for the 12 months to the end of January. That's a very strong position for us to be in to take on those insourced audits and the additional responsibilities that we have for the year ahead. So taking all of that into very careful consideration, as well as thinking and recognising that there is a cost of living impact and inflation forecasts that our people are dealing with, we think that 2.5 strikes the right balance in the context of the pay awards and the pay and grading structuring that we've reviewed in previous years.
I'm not necessarily expecting you to answer the next question because it's sensitive, but it would help us in our next hearing. Can you tell us the effects that the problems with capita running civil service pensions are having on your organisation, your staff?
Well, I mean, one of the impacts that I'm sure everybody is aware of is the impact on recently retired or upcoming retirees who will be expecting a pension payment. I mean, in line with what government has been doing, we have put in place a small hardship loan scheme to support those colleagues who may need it at this time.
That's really helpful, thank you. Just very quick questions, two questions, so I'm going to roll into one. I think this probably is your field, Max. London offices, is that you? No, I'm not hitting the right target at all this morning. Yeah. Perhaps try you, CNAG. London office, you've been very kind and hosted a number of events for this committee, and you've been very kind and shown us around what your modifications to your London office you've done. Looks very high quality. Can you tell us how the effect of that expenditure, the payback, and how you're getting on with letting out some of the spare bits of your office?
Just in headline terms, we've refurbished the floors that we occupy so that we're able to use less space in total and let out more to earn the income. But it also now better reflects the way we're working with a lot more collaboration spaces, places for teams to get together on project topics rather than just serried ranks of hot desks. So it's a better setup for the way we're now working. That project will finish at the end of next month, bang on schedule, and it's come in on budget as well. So we're really pleased with the contractor that has worked with us on that, who've done a good job and delivered what we needed bang on time.
And so you've done all the work, you've got spare space to let out. In this quite difficult commercial market, are you finding suitable tenants?
We've got 8 floors out of available 10 at the moment, which are fully occupied. Subject to signing the final lease agreements, we are expecting to have all 10 of the currently available floors occupied from the 1st of April, which will generate an additional £1 million in terms of income, which is part of that productivity plan that the CNAG spoke about earlier. We will have an additional floor available early on in the next financial year that we will be looking to actively market from April, with the hope that we can further increase that rental income.
Well done. I'm sure a lot of landlords would like to be in your position, so well done. Clive, on international comparison, please.
Yes. Looking at the way that you operate and looking at value for money, very often the committee likes to say, well, do they do it better elsewhere? The answer can very often be yes. Are you able to do more of that work in future? Is that something you're looking to expand? Because I think it really helps the committee to put things in perspective when we're trying to make judgments about whether things really are being delivered as well as they should be.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the things that we are trying to do more of, and we have done more of recently. I think in the last year or so, we've done around a quarter of our reports have had relatively substantial international comparisons or sometimes private sector examples of good practice that we build into the reports. So some good recent examples, we looked at emissions trading schemes, for example, across different countries. The asylum report had an extensive annex actually comparing different asylum schemes across different countries. And we've done similar work on various different contracts and procurements and so on. The use of consultants is the other recent example that we have compared different internal consulting schemes within different countries. So, for example, in Germany, there is a 900-person unit that does within government consulting, and it's just a way of understanding how people do it differently. We are keen to expand and continue to expand in this area. We find it's very helpful both in identifying good practice and suggestions. We had a recent very positive interaction with the Treasury around our work on fees and charges, where we talked to the New Zealand Treasury, who do slightly different approach to advising different departments on how they should set charges and fees to the public when they are recouping costs in that way. So this is all useful area. The interesting work that we're trying to do now is look at whether we can use technology and AI to review reports or documents from either other audit agencies in other countries, or even public administrations where there's public documents, to try and identify those good practices, because that would be a way of covering that very extensive terrain quickly.
And will that affect what we see in terms of the reports you produce?
Yes, we hope so, and I hope you're already seeing some of that. We'll try and do as much as we can. It depends a little bit on the topic area that we're covering, but wherever it's suitable, we'll certainly consider it.
Is one area you might look at in terms of international comparisons, IT data? I mean, the committee's going to Denmark to look at this. Mm-hmm. I think it's very frustrating when we see bits of good practice and you go in the same department to a different system for a different purpose, and the IT is completely different. One's been reformed and reviewed, and the other one's still from where it was 30 or 40 years ago.
Yes, and we have done some of that in the past. I mean, it's quite a long time ago, but when agile developments were brought in, we looked at particularly at private sector comparisons and examples in that case. We are doing some work at the moment on digital ID, and we're interested in actually how that works in different environments, and that's something that even government is very keen on looking at how other comparators do.
I think the classic area of your attention, Clive, is the health service. I had a meeting with medical practitioners last week. They complain like mad that all the different systems, they can't communicate with different bits of the health service, which hinders their task considerably. Just one final question from me, CNAG, if I may. You said something very interesting earlier on, that your value for money reports are in your budget, about £20 million, compared to £1 trillion worth of government expenditure that you audit. Are you thinking of any changes in your value for money reports to make that spend, if you like, go a little further? I mean, we're very happy with what you do, don't get me wrong, but are you thinking of any changes?
Constantly, and because we want to make them as impactful as possible. And it's not always about the format of the report itself. It could be about how we make some of our findings available in other ways. So we're definitely making greater use of webinars and in-person seminars for people in the field that we've audited, and we're getting really good interest in people wanting to understand not just the headline findings, but how do I improve this service that you've looked at nationally? How do I improve it in my organisation? So we're looking very hard at how do we make our findings work harder in that way. On the report itself, I mean, the main thing is making sure it's accessible through digital means as well. What we're finding, actually, in common with lots of organisations, the old search engine approach to finding NAO reports isn't working anymore. People are getting AI summaries now when they do a search, and we're having to reconfigure our own website to make sure it serves up the right results. Because what we were finding was that some of those AI summaries are actually not very useful or accurate summaries of the topic that somebody was looking for from the NAO. So it's a good example where new technology means that we've actually got to rethink how we design our website to make sure that somebody searching for, say, show me the NAO work on procurement, gets a useful set of results and accurately sent to the source material rather than a slightly misleading summary of it.
So Clive has already referred to your infographic on the wiring diagram for asylum seekers. maybe a reference to that in your report, so that if people want to query a particular bit of that wiring diagram, it's readily available for them.
Exactly, and in that case it sits alongside the report on the website, and we do signpost this is where to find detail about how the system works. So more of that, I suspect.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any further questions? Gareth, can I reiterate Rupert's sincere thanks to you and to all of your people who work in your organisation. You are unfeignedly helpful to us, not only in the quality of our value for money reports and audits, but also to, I'm sure, some of our pretty simplistic questions sometimes sophisticated, I hope. But you are always very helpful, and I wish you would be grateful if you'd pass that thanks on to all of your staff. We really appreciate what you do. Thank all three of you for coming today.
Thanks.
So, thank you. We will now suspend the session and restart with our next witnesses, which are going to be Capita. We're going to do that at 11 o'clock to allow a little bit more discussion and briefing. So, do we want Lee to come back again?
Yes.
Yes, please, Lee. If Lee is